Greetings, lovely people, and welcome to a brand new series for the channel. So, as many of you will know, for years at this point, both on this channel and on previous channels, I have been reviewing stuff under the moniker of Fast Track Reviews, and don't worry, that is never going to change. Fast Track is forever going to be my main review, system, service, I don't know, show. But I've been really wanting to kind of express ideas and thoughts and all that kind of thing about stuff that I, didn't cover when it was relevant, or just didn't watch specifically when it was relevant. And that is where this comes in. So, welcome to the first episode of Movies I Missed. We're going to be talking about Chronicle, and, this is going to be very similar to what Fast Track Thoughts is, except for the fact that rather than just talking about my thoughts initially after watching something that's relevant, that's new, I've just seen it in the cinema, I've just watched it on TV. Instead, this is going to be the same general idea, unscripted, a few notes maybe, but that's really the extent of it. Just chatting, just talking, giving my thoughts on a film or TV series that I just watched that isn't new, isn't really relevant in any way, but it's just something I want to discuss. So, yeah, roll that brand new intro, and we'll get into it. So, I'll start off by just saying that Chronicle is one of those films where I've always heard a lot about it, and as someone who, enjoys a lot of superhero content, a lot of superhero media, it's always been something that's been recommended to me, that and things like Misfits, that kind of thing. I guess it's kind of like The Boys, which is another series that I've really enjoyed in the past, of just superhero content that's not necessarily about the heroes. It's super, but it's not necessarily about the good guys, and Chronicle is just that, really. It's a story of three friends, kind of, getting superpowers, and one of them kind of going a bit off the rails because of it. And it's a really interesting thing. We've obviously seen it with so many different films and TV, over the years, over the decades, and it's always nice to see that, a character like Superman represented in The Boys, or represented in Starspot, or whatever it is, the kids Superman goes villainous route thing. I forgot what it's actually called, but it's always interesting to me seeing those perspectives of what if this being with untapped potential, basically invulnerable to everything, all these ridiculous powers, can just destroy whatever he wants. What if they weren't on the side of good, like Superman typically is? And I think Chronicle does it in a really interesting way, in my opinion, because of the fact that you're looking at it as three friends that all have the exact same power set, and it's just the one that has a little bit more power happens to also turn bad. So it's a case of these friends are trying to fix themselves, they're trying to fix each other, they're trying to help each other more than anything, and I just think it's a really interesting take on the idea. Of course, we have Andrew... what is his last name? Dahan? Who played the Joker? Jeez, that's wrong. Green Goblin, even, in Amazing Spider-Man, or Harry Osborn, Green Goblin, whatever you want to call him. As well as Michael B. Jordan, who obviously played Killmonger in Black Panther. So that's really interesting but obviously, I believe Chronicle, it came out in 2012, so I believe that's before Amazing Spider-Man 2, and it's definitely before Black Panther by a good amount of time. So it's really interesting that these two actors went on to play iconic villains of the superhero genre. It's a really interesting thing. And then it's Alex Russell, I think, is the other main character. I don't know him from anything else, quite honestly. He's not, a name that I'm familiar with. But, he was very good in this. And quite honestly, the entire cast throughout were all phenomenal. This is a really well done film in a lot of regards. I will say the actual effects, and I know why this is the case, but I'll say it anyway. The effects are a little bit meh, especially the flight, but this all breaks down to the fact that not only is this supposed to be like a found footage type film, take it or leave it. I'm not the biggest fan of fan footage, though. I do like things that are fan footage. There's Super 8 or whatever was a absolute blast. I love that film. There's a bunch of different things. Cloverfield as well is a great example of a fan footage film that I really enjoy. So yeah, it's like I'm not against fan footage style films. I think I've just been ruined by them because of the horror genre overusing it. But I think this uses it pretty well as the fact that it also works in a lot of the power set because of how Andrew, Dane DeHaan's character, is, obsessed essentially with this camera, and it's somewhat because he wants to like capture everything because he has an abusive father. He wants to be able to capture any time that his dad abuses him. So presumably it's never like outright said, but presumably it is so that if something goes too far, like to an extent that he's absolutely just not like happy to just let it continue anymore, he could potentially like take it to the police or anything. It never gets said, but I'd assume that is probably why he just suddenly decided, I'm going to start recording everything. And yeah, it's a really interesting idea of just having this person who's like obsessed with camera work, obsessed with always filming everything. And there is actually another character. I don't actually. It's Casey. I'm trying to think. Is it Ashley? Is it Ashley Hinshaw? Is that her name? I can't remember the actress's name properly. But yeah, she plays a blogger, which is a really interesting thing in a found footage film to have just another character who is filming things, because it also normalizes it. Obviously, set in 2012, so this was the pretty much the boom, the like big jumping off point for a lot of people into the vlog sphere on places like YouTube. So it's always really interesting that it's a found footage movie first and foremost, and the person actually filming everything doesn't really want to share it all too much. We never find out if it gets shared anywhere specific. We just see it as an audience. It's really interesting that in this world, there are people that are perfectly normal, that aren't obsessed with cameras necessarily, but just happen to record a lot of stuff. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And towards the end as well, they do some really fun things with CCTV. They show a lot of interiors of buildings during fights. They show a lot of interiors of like hospitals when they're being run through and stuff, which is all really interesting stuff. And yeah, that footage would exist. And I like how they don't try and explain where the footage comes from. I think that was the smartest option. Like, just explain it as like, as the audience, we are omnipotent. We are just able to look through all these cameras. And there are a handful of shots that I believe are not supposed to be like handheld shots, that are supposed to be like, cinematic shots, but it's hard to tell because they're all framed in a way that looks amateurish on purpose, clearly. But it's a very interestingly shot film, and honestly, I really like the aesthetic. It's something, as I say, that I really like with Super 8. That entire aesthetic of just like everything that you see is because it was framed in that way, like purposely, not necessarily to look good, but just because, that's how some kids would set up a shot. And this is the same sort of thing. How would a socially awkward person who records everything be setting up these shots? Too many close-ups, maybe a bit too wide, maybe the framing is off and stuff. And I think it works really well. And then we also, as I kind of alluded to earlier, have the setup of the cinematic shots, like towards the middle and end especially, of the cinematic shots are largely because Andrew is using his power to move the camera without him holding it. And I think that's a really interesting use of telekinesis, which that is the power set that they have. They have various forms of telekinesis, mostly just being able to move things with their mind in general, but it also allows for flight, which I like that explanation of flight. It's not my preferred one. I actually prefer the Superman logic of it's a separate ability that just happens to allow you to levitate, and it's actually to do with gravity and stuff. I do enjoy that way of describing flight in superhero movies and superhero content in general a bit more. But yeah, telekinesis, perfectly reasonable. And in a way, magnetism does play a part in their power set. So if I can accept that, like, Magneto can just float because he can pick himself up by the metal in his blood, like, I can completely accept that people are able to fly, not even as well as Magneto, just fly in a bit of a roundabout way using telekinesis. I really like that idea. This is a really interesting film behind the scenes as well. Obviously, it's Josh Trank, but it also has Max Landis, and Max Landis is someone that has been covered in controversy over the last, well, pretty much since it came out, so pretty much the last decade, and it does kind of put a downer on this film if you know that, and going into it, I was very aware that Max Landis was involved, and I didn't let it sour my judgment too much, because at the end of the day, some terrible people make amazing content, and that goes for any level of media. That goes for written work, that goes for movies, that goes for TV shows. Hell, it goes for YouTube content. There are plenty of terrible YouTubers that make amazing content. They're terrible people, should I say. And, it doesn't take away from me the fact that, Max Landis is not the greatest person ever, and was the one of the the co-writer for the story, as well as I believe he was the producer. But yeah, it's one of those things where if you know about that, if you're a bit knowledgeable about behind the scenes stuff of the industry, that can be a bit of a sour. It can leave a sour taste. That's how I'm going to put that. But overall, the production is phenomenal, and I'm never going to take away from the actual production because of some controversy behind the scenes. And generally, I really enjoyed this. This was, something that I essentially, I was actually inspired to watch it. Inspired, that's a dumb word. But I was made to want to watch it by watching a Film Comics Explained video, just talking about what exactly the, I guess, it's kind of an alien. I think they call it a MOBO or something. I can't remember the actual definition. Josh Trank has given a definition of what the creature is that gives them the powers. But watching that video made me just go, you know what? I'm gonna go and watch Chronicle, and it is on Disney Plus, so that made it a lot easier. It's something that I definitely recommend. It's a very interesting film, and I don't think, other than what is the evil kid Superman? What is it called now? But other than that, I don't think. It's Brightburn. That's what it's called. It's just clicked. It's Brightburn. Other than Brightburn, I don't think I've ever watched any sort of superhero media that's quite like this, and that's including things like The Boys and the animated one that's very similar. That's on Prime. I can't remember. There's so many of these, and they're all just bouncing around in my head. It's hard to bring the ones I actually need to talk about to the front. But yeah, it's very much a case where this sort of media is getting more and more common. But I think Chronicle may be, other than Brightburn, the first one where I've straight up gone, this is really intelligently made. They've put thought into every aspect of it, and then it's cinematically interesting. Brightburn looks phenomenal, and there's a lot of that which is actually kind of home movie-esque, and it's with Chronicle, it goes hard into that idea. It's all handheld for the most part, all handheld footage with a little bit of cinematography, cinematic shots that are actually written into the story as being because of the powers of the character, which I think is really smart. But yeah, overall, I think, yeah, Chronicle is a really good film, and I don't really see myself finding anything as good as it in the same sort of evil superhero genre, especially because a lot of the time, they are TV shows. The films about it are, in my mind, literally just Chronicle and Brightburn. It's a really niche subject matter to cover in a superhero story, and I think Chronicle does it expertly. That has to be my end point, that this is just an expertly made film. And sure, I could go over some light criticisms, but I feel for something like this, it's not really worth it. I really enjoyed this film, and I think most people, under pretty much any circumstances, would agree that this is a really well-made film. And that's really all I have to say about it. If I was to give it a review, which, of course, I will be doing on my Letterboxd as well, I'll say in this, don't worry. That's in the link in the description if you're wanting to follow my Letterboxd. But I'm going to give it an 8. An 8 out of 10. 4 stars. And yeah, that's high. And, I may come back to this on a repeat viewing and maybe decide that it goes lower, or maybe even decide that it goes higher. But coming out of it, literally having watched it 20 minutes ago, I'm really blown away by how good this actually is. And yeah, overall, that is all I wanted to say. So thanks for joining me for the first episode of Movies I Missed. And yeah, tell me what you thought in the comments below of Chronicle if you've watched it. Tell me what you thought of the video as well in the comments. Like it if you did like it, subscribe if you're new here, and ring that bell so you never miss an upload. Otherwise, do you want to see me look at certain films? I've seen a lot of films in my time. Letterboxd is a good way of tracking what I have and haven't watched. If it isn't on Letterboxd, I haven't watched it in the last 10 years, realistically, because I started Letterboxd about 8 years ago and I went back a little bit just to cover things that I remembered. But yeah, in any case, that's going to be it for this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!
It's been a long week. I feel like I could use a vacation.